Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems and surviving the total eclipse in America. I mean, folks, our guest, those of you who are watching us on the YouTube, will see our guest, Spencer, is a full contact eclipse survivor because of where he lives. I mean,
that's a fact.
Well, I mean, did the earth shake? Your dogs do circles and flips, or maybe the horses got loose? I don't know, man. What? Any crazy?
It was pretty cool, actually. I went up to my buddy's house up north, and we hung out in the backyard and pretty much watched the whole thing. It was significantly more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. It was pretty crazy how dark it got and how much it probably cooled off like 5 to 10 degrees there for a couple of minutes when it was in totality. So it's just very eerie, felt almost like apocalyptic. You didn't hear any traffic or anything. It was very quiet. It kind of felt like, I hate bringing up this reference, but it was almost very much like 9/11, where everybody was all focused on the same exact thing. And there was just an eeriness kind of across the entire area, is at least what it felt like. But yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, I don't think there's supposed to be another one for like 30 or 40 years, and there definitely won't be one in totality in Dallas. So cool experience for sure.
That's cool, man. That's cool. Yeah. Miss Suzanne and I went out there with our welding goggles on and
nice.
checked it out. You know, did the all right. Yep. There it goes.
Yep. It was a little lackluster until it actually got to like the full shebang. Because we went out there half an hour early and I was like, okay, just sit here. Like, let's hang out for a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and stare at this thing for the next 30 minutes.
Pass the sunscreen, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was thinking here in Tucson. I think we got like 60% coverage or something. And I was like, yeah, I don't know how much it's worth sitting out there for 2 hours watching it go from 0 to 60 back down. You know, that might not be as thrilling.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a big difference though when it goes all the way away. Mm-hmm. And that's, did you have any epiphanies in that darkness?
I didn't have any epiphanies. My wife and I, her in particular, are pretty spiritual people. So the day prior, we sort of set out some goals and intentions and the stuff that we wanted to rid ourselves with, and kind of thought about that, meditated on it, whatever you want to label it as before going into it. But I can't say that there was like any profound occurrence or anything that happened while
no next great idea, man. I mean,
no, nothing yet. Nothing yet.
Well, what was there a t-shirt idea? I mean,
there we go.
There's always t-shirt ideas. Usually it's adult libations that bring those about more than things that happen in space.
I'm sure that's where a lot of those come from. Tell us the story about how you and your buddies had that moment, a non-eclipse moment, where it was like, hey, I think we should put something together. Yeah.
It really started by accident, to be honest. We never set out with the intention of starting a company. I met a couple of guys at my first duty station, post-flight school, which was a JBLM. And we were all in the same battalion, different companies, but naturally just sort of gravitated towards each other and really enjoyed flying, working out, and drinking beers on the weekends. And that's kind of what we did all the time. And our battalion leadership nicknamed us the Brotallion. And so that's where the name came from. I mean, there's a group chat with it. It's still active today with the original guys and all that. And it really started, we were all just working out, hanging out one day. And I think it was Brett was like, the Brotallion name is a really cool nickname. We should make a tank top or something just for ourselves as like something to wear at the beach or at the gym or whatever. And I had a old soccer buddy whose sister lived out in the Seattle area, and she went to school for graphic design, and she kind of drew up some stuff for us. And like we made a little logo and went to a local spring printing shop and made some, like 15 shirts for ourselves. And some people liked them, and it kind of started to catch on a little bit. But at that time it was, there was no business sense. There was no strategy, nothing like that. But what we did start doing was, this was more in the infancy of social media before it was so consumer focused and quality content and all that kind of stuff. It was like, hey, look at what I cooked for dinner tonight. And like my 12 friends liked it. It's much more authentic, I think. But I say that because there was not really any aviation content out there. And so as we were, progressing through our careers, we were just taking videos and pictures of guys and girls flying and fixing helicopters and stuff and sharing it because we thought it was the coolest job in the world. And we sort of started to grow and incubate a little community there in the spirit of Army aviation. And that's really what kind of started to build a community, so to speak. And then later on down the road, we kind of recognized a gap in terms of culture and representation, in particular when compared to like the Navy and the Air Force aviation buddies that I have, and a lot of the cool traditions and stuff that they have with call sign parties and squadron bars and, Flight Suit Fridays and a lot of stuff that it felt that the Army had kind of purged itself of in the effort to make everybody equal and the same. And so that was the inspiration for, hey, let's see if we can bring some of that back through apparel and other products that just kind of say in its own way, like, hey, I'm a pilot and proud of it, or used to be, or a crew chief or whatever. And so that's kind of the thesis behind the whole thing.
How did it start to click and you start to make those first few steps towards, being the more serious business? You joke that it started on accident. You're not jumping all the way to it's like, hey, we're full going now, but like take me in that like halfway step where it's like, look, I see the opportunity, maybe still working other jobs, whatever it is, and trying to start to piece that together.
Yeah, it's a great question. In 2020, I was finishing up on active duty, actually down at 7th Group in a air liaison position. And I really cherished my deployment as a platoon leader. We had a really great company. We had really good culture. And it was the one time in my career where I literally just flew every day and focused on that and the guys, which was a really enjoyable experience, and actually like conducting your mission set. And I had a deployment t-shirt that was like, had holes in it and, logos coming off and everything. And I was like, I wish I could get another one of these. And a kind of light bulb went off. It's like, well, we have a t-shirt company. Like, why don't I just get a graphic designer to recreate that logo and recreate our deployment stuff? And that was kind of the inspiration for the custom unit apparel, which is a huge component of our business model, probably about 50%, give or take, depending on when you look at that data. And that is what really started to drive our growth. And so I say that I think it was like spring or summer maybe of 2020. And that really started driving revenue. And we just had units. I mean, this was like up until the end of last year, really everything that we've done has been grassroots, word of mouth. We haven't put a ton of money and energy behind traditional marketing mechanisms like, the meta ads and the email campaigns and SMS and stuff. That's all more recent. And so we started to get all these units coming through just from word of mouth and like the social media and stuff. And so that was some proof of concept there. I transitioned out in late 2020, early 2021, and I really didn't know what I was going to do, what I was supposed to do. I went to UT, that's Tennessee for all the Texas folk listening,
don't worry,
go to business school.
It's an Aggie podcast.
Yeah, there you go, man. I like it. And I like the Aggies. I was just I went to business school, and the plan was to pivot and to use that to help pivot into corporate America. And so I was, doing interviews for consulting companies and stuff, because it was like, I don't know what I can do. And I had some buddies that were already in a few of those different firms and had hooked me up with some interviews and everything. And that was the path that I was on. But during that time frame for that year or so, where I was really just kind of focused on school, I was spending more time on the business. And at the same time, Brett, the other co-founder, my business partner, was doing a skill bridge focused on flying. So he was transitioning out. He was focusing more on the marketing and the content and stuff. And, we noticed a direct reflection of time spent on the business versus growth and revenue. And so that was kind of an exciting thing to see. Right. And I read Shoe Dog in school. Somebody recommended it. It's a really great book. If anybody listening is not familiar with it or has not read it, it's Phil Knight's memoir about the origins of Nike. And it is just, I've read it a few times and listened to it on audiobook as well. It's a really, really great book. And you think about Nike as the organization that it is today, and to hear how it started, where a dude just made up a company on the fly to try and get like his first order. And there was like some scrappy guys selling shoes out of the back of a trunk. It was just a realization that nobody knows what can I cuss on here?
Yeah, you're all right.
If not, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing when they get started. It's just a matter of getting started and figuring out along the way and kind of breaking down that barrier of like, you're not just like born into business greatness. And nobody has all the, maybe if they're on their second or their third, startup or business, so to speak. But when you're first getting started, nobody knows what it is. And so that was eye-opening. And there was a lot of other themes throughout that journey in that book that I really resonated with, and kind of just forced me to look at what I was doing, what we were doing with Brotallion. I was like, there's a lot of potential here. I don't know how scalable it really is, but my wife and I don't have children yet, and we're both relatively free-spirited. And so I chatted with her, and she was like, let's fucking do it. And so that was kind of the decision point of like, let's put the whole corporate thing on the side and see if we can, survive and do the entrepreneurial thing. And that was the come to Jesus moment, so to speak, was reading that book and kind of having the recollection of all these similarities. And I'm by no means comparing Brotallion to Nike or anything, but it was
not yet.
It was very much in my face. And so I was like, let's face this and give it a shot and do it. And so that was December of 2021. So it's been a couple of years now that I've been going at this kind of on a full-time basis.
How are you filling the gap? And this is really kind of a twofold question, not a two-part, but a twofold question. Because every pilot I've ever known, they get the flying is their passion. And you even mentioned it. That was one of the best deployments I ever had because I flew every day. Mm-hmm. And then you step away from that. How are you filling that gap, that void? I'll leave the descriptors to you rather than putting a bug in your head on it.
No, I know what you're asking. For me, I don't think I had the true passion that some aviators have that will just fly until they die, so to speak. I enjoyed it. It was a really cool job. I was also the commissioned route. And for those that are not familiar with the Army aviation structure, we have both commissioned and warrant officers. And so after that platoon leader gig, midway through that deployment, I got a text message from my company commander that was like, hey, pack up your shit. You're leaving Mez and going to Bagram to be the Brigade S1. And so it's like, if I make a career out of this anyways, I'm not on the sticks unless I revert, which I ended up doing in the Guard for the couple of years that I did in the Guard to kind of help with the transition. But for me, I kind of recognized that part of that career was going away anyways. And I don't think I truly had the like deep, fiery passion that a lot of people really do. And it was okay. Like, do I miss it? Absolutely. I do. It was a lot of fun, but I missed the people more than the actual aspect of flying. And so I was comfortable when I walked away from it completely. When I left the Guard, I knew that I was in a good place with it. And, if that changes a few years down the road, you can always go back. But since then, I feel very confident in that decision that I've made. I don't have any doubts. I got to accomplish most of what I wanted to do. And I think I have kind of been called for a different purpose. And that chapter has helped lead me into that. And it's an integral part of who I am as a person. But, I'm happy not wiggling sticks anymore, at least for the time being.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, let me ask the second fold of this twofold question. What is something from your flying days that's helping you or that you still revert back to and use in business?
That's a good question. Probably preparation. I think I had a lot of that prior to flying, which probably helped getting a flight spot and going through flight school and everything. But everything from all the preparation that's required for mission planning, and especially on the assault side, and chair flying when you're in flight school and practicing everything from everything that I'm going to touch to take off to the traffic pattern to the calls I'm going to make, like all that kind of stuff. It's very much rehearse. And I think taking that into whether it's, going into a pitch competition or putting together a business plan or whatever the case might be, making sure that you're squared away before you walk in to that room or that door, so to speak, I think is probably something that's pretty helpful. It's not something that I think about a lot, but kind of just reacting to that question in real time, I think that's probably a trait that is relatively helpful in the business world.
I wanted to drill into that a little bit, and actually, I'm trying to think. Waldo was his flight name. Down, I'm blanking on his actual name, but guess we had on the podcast too. I want to say he was at the Canadian Air Force or something along those lines. There we go.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But one of the things that he talked about that I thought was super interesting in the preparation and rehearsal side there, Spencer, is the scripting of something that's like unscriptable. Like the idea that it's like you go through all this preparation to get to the point where it's like when you're out there flying, and I don't know shit about flying, sorry, but you're out there and you know that this thing happens over here, you're going to go slightly to the left. And then if something else happens, you're going to go, there's all of these kind of like scripted answers to something that is like completely unscripted and completely, on the fly, to use, the accidental pun there. Could you talk a little bit about how that preparation plays into something where you can't really script anything that's going to happen, but yet you do at the same time? I don't know. It's a weird balance there.
Yeah, that's it's a great analysis, and I'm sure Otis is very familiar with that too. Being a Green Beret, it's like all the mission planning and that shit goes right out the door as soon as rounds start going and whatever else. It's the same thing, right? Like you can plan and plan and plan, and then your plan goes to shit, and you have to react real time. And I think that's everybody in this room is familiar that that's very much how the business world is. If you guys are familiar with the All In podcast, they do like a bunch of business and tech updates. And one of the guys, I think it was Jay Cal, they were all talking about it collectively a few weeks ago, but they were talking about how the traditional successful person in today's world is not necessarily going to be successful or cut out for entrepreneurship. And because it's very much like a math problem, right? Like you go to high school, you get really good grades and test scores, you go to school XYZ, you do the same thing, you get job XYZ, you do those things at that job, you get the next promotion or whatever. It's very linear. It makes sense. It's very logical. And in entrepreneurship, it's, you do A and you get one of 100 other things and punched in the face. And it's like every day is the worst day of your life. And then all of a sudden you have a high and you have to like be able to take that win and kind of stack them on top of each other and continue to progress. But there is there's certain things that you can do, right, to set yourself up for success, but it's very much kind of facing adversity on a 24/7 basis. And if you can stay in the game long enough, if there's a sound enough business model and some other things in there, like you're going to come out on top. And I think where a lot of people fail is probably due to attrition, whether that's they run out of money or they just can't handle that type of lifestyle and failure after failure and, the world of unknown and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's very applicable. It was like some real world shit that they were talking about that I really resonated with, because I'd stumbled into this. Like I said earlier, this was not like a planned thing to do. And the path that I was on from a child was what we just talked about, do X, get Y kind of thing all the way. And so that's probably the most difficult part for me, is like constantly dealing with the roller coaster of the journey of, trying to build and scale a company. And it's like, loss after loss after loss after loss, big win, let's celebrate, right back to you're on the ropes again. And it's difficult, but I think the more that you get exposed to it, the easier it comes, the less stressed out you are about it. It's like, yeah, I just fucking got punched in the face again. No big deal. It's just like the 100 times before that, step back up and keep going. And I don't know if that necessarily answered your question, Cam, because I kind of went off on a tangent there. I don't know if there's really any great direct scenario or like thing that I can take from my experience as an aviator and tie it to business. But I do think getting exposed to all this preparation and stuff that you do, your 96-hour planning process, and then all of that shit going out the door when you're actually on the mission and you're 3 minutes behind timeline before you even take off, and being able to react to that, live and make up what you need to do and all that kind of stuff. I think it's more of a subconscious type of thing that your mind gets used to. And it's like, well, I've seen this, 100 times before, maybe in a different type of scenario, in a different type of work or whatever it might be. But the principles are the same as far as me staying cool, me leveraging the people around me, the fact that I did prepare and I do know what I'm supposed to do when this type of thing happens, and just sort of like reacting without thinking, so to speak. And I think that goes into like the practice and the training or whatever you want to call it, is like, the more you do something, the better and better and better you get at it, to the point to where it becomes just natural. And I think, after a few years of doing something, you start to get that confidence a little bit, in terms of like, I don't necessarily know what's going to happen today or this quarter or this year or whatever, but I know that I'm capable of handling it. Mm-hmm. And I know that my team is capable of supporting each other and working through it, I think is sort of the theme that you could take out of the military as a whole, really, depending on what your MOS is and your job, and translating that into kind of the entrepreneurial realm.
Yeah, I think there's this really interesting, like, you can learn it and you can kind of identify those patterns and those like individual pieces there. But when you're actually dealing with, whether it's business or whatever, my mind keeps going to rugby because that's my background. But it's like, It creates, nothing ever looks the exact same. So you have the skill there becomes like the actual like recognition of it. Like, Dad, we'll talk about rugby attack. And it's basically, you're just trying to create a 2-on-1. And it's like, you have to recognize the moment where now's the time where there's a 2-on-1 and we're going. And everything else is just kind of playing the chess match, setting that thing up. Same thing kind of goes in business a lot of the time, where you're playing almost like this waiting game, where you're trusting the process, going through, whatever it is, whatever stage of business you're in, you're trusting that process as you're growing. And then you have to recognize, like, oh, hey, I read that book about Nike, and this is that kind of moment right here. Spencer, could you talk some about maybe the direct connection of Nike, since we were talking about that book, Shoe Dog, but of the, like, look, I had a moment where, you're reading the book and it's like, oh, this looks just like that. Now I need to seize this opportunity. This is what that looks like.
I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing from that book was me actually taking the plunge and the gamble to try this and do it. And it's been a few years now since I read that. I should probably go back and reread it. But that was the overall theme that I got from that. It was like, these guys didn't know what they were doing. They consistently were met with adversity. They overcame it because they, through sheer willpower, a lot of the times, just kept doing it because of their passion, their belief in what they were trying to build and their purpose. And I think that's something that Brett and I do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a significant size type of problem or just like a relatively small and annoying one that still elevates the blood pressure. It's the same principles applied, right, with how you handle that and move forward.
Share with us, because in your story, your accidental business, it went from, because we've got here with my buddies, my hunting buddies, we have the Retired Military Hunting Club. Almost the exact same thing. We had some shirts done up and hats and things like that. And it's really just shoot the shit, drink whiskey around the campfire when you're not hunting, sort of thing.
I like it.
Yeah, so do we. When you shift from the shoot the shit and drinking whiskey around the fire to turning it into a business, things always change. And one of the things that changes is there's a true duties and responsibilities. How did you and Brad settle that up and kind of say, all right, I'll take this, you take that, sort of thing?
We were really fortunate in that I think we both naturally fell into roles that, whether or not that's what we're meant to be doing, that's what we're currently doing and seem to be doing okay at it. We all used to contribute to the Instagram page way back in the day. And he really stepped up and took ownership of that, I think, in like 2019, 2020, and has done a miraculous job transforming it into what it is today. From content creation and to the point now to where the community really, it's all community driven. It's all users, people that, hey, look at this picture of us today. Look at this flight that we did at NOE. Like it's the creation of content. Yes, there's still an element of that because he still flies in the Michigan Guard and stuff and has opportunities and access to be able to do that. But 90% of it is community driven, which I think that's the best anyways, right? Like it's continuing to drive the fact that people love highlighting what they think is the coolest job in the world. But I say that because he's really fallen into the marketing realm of things. And so everything from not just the content creation, but some of the stuff that we talked about earlier with how we're going to strategize the meta advertisements and the email campaigns and the SMS and how that all ties together in the lifetime of a customer is very much what he's just kind of owned. And I've kind of just stepped into the CEO type of position. We never had a conversation about it. It just naturally occurred. And I think that's awesome because those conversations can sometimes be really difficult. I'm not a person that enjoys confrontation. I grew up in a family with that kind of stuff on a day-to-day basis. And so my natural reaction to that is like, I don't really want to deal with that kind of shit. Let me just push it to the side and try and keep everybody happy. But we really never had to have like a difficult conversation on like, hey, this is what I think I should be doing. This is what I think I should be doing. And like going back and forth, it just sort of naturally happened.
Could you talk some about either finding that passion as you kind of naturally fell into that role, or, or whatever that looks like? Because what I keep thinking of is the idea of, as an entrepreneur, I like to joke all the time on the podcast of like being like the C+ student, where it's like you do a little bit of everything, you kind of run all over the place. And then comes these moments. Yeah. I've had a few of these different ones in my different ventures where it's like, now I have to be the blank guy. I have to dive all in on this. It's not necessarily your favorite thing, but it's like I have to be the person who solves this problem for us right now. That like the need is what kind of necessitates the action on that. Could you talk a bit about going through that process and like diving in on the CEO role? And then if you found that true passion as you were going through, then even better to kind of make it a part 2 to the question.
Yeah, I really enjoy getting shit done. I take extreme satisfaction in like checking shit off a list for whatever reason. That's just like, it feels like mini wins, and it's like a scoreboard, and it's like quantitative evidence that I'm whether it's the right shit or not. I enjoy checking that stuff off the list. Yeah. Like there were times back in the day where it's like, I already did something, I forgot to write it on there. Let me write it off so I have the satisfaction of checking it off.
I do that too. No problem there.
Yeah. With that said, it was very easy for me to work in the business on the day-to-day stuff. Like it fills up your time very quickly. The day's over like that. I feel like I was accomplishing shit. And the more people I talk to, the more I try and learn and read and listen or whatever. It's like, you have to get yourself into a position where you're working, on the business with strategy, with vision, whatever buzzword you want to throw out there, instead of so much in it. And so the big thing for me was we brought on Nick, who's, our VP of operations, our GM, whatever you want to call it. He's basically worked me out of a job, so to speak, as far as what I do, like in the company. He does all of that stuff now. And quite frankly, better than I ever could. Like a lot of the systems and stuff that he's improved on, what he's done for the custom apparel side and what he does with managing our team of graphic designers and the project workflow and all that kind of shit is way better than anything that I ever did. So the big thing for me was like, okay, I'm not so involved in the day-to-day anymore. And now I have more free time. It's like, what do I need to be doing with this time so that I feel like I'm accomplishing something and like continuing to drive the business forward? And so a lot of times it's learning, it's listening to podcasts like this, it's reading, books and everything. Like usually I spend my morning trying to learn something, that might help in the business in some form or fashion. And there's still an element of day-to-day stuff that I get involved in and everything. How we're going to introduce new products to market. Like what does our community need or want? Brett is really great with that because he's still involved and talks to guys and girls on a day-to-day basis and sees the things happening on the flight line. So having those discussions and figuring out like, what are some things that we could introduce that people, find value for, that we can also make a couple bucks on, and figuring out how we can do that. So right now it's like introducing some more, we just released the Wubby hoodie stuff in Q4 last year. That's been a massive success. People love that. And then it's like, okay, well, a lot of units really love Wubby hoodies. I'm sure they'd love to have their embroidered logo on it. And that was like a huge unlock for us. And it's super simple, but like just thinking about like, how can we take this product that's having a lot of success and then basically milk more value out of it? Same thing for that is like leveraging our supply chain. Our partners up in Milwaukee that do all our inventory and our printing and embroidery, the warehouse operations, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. She loves our Wubby hoodies. And she's like, I want to start, like, can I buy these from you guys and send them to some of my other clients? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. And so now it's like, okay, I can charge them up front, and that helps alleviate the cost of these massive orders that we're having to put to these manufacturing facilities overseas, which helps mitigate the punch of that overhead before there's a month turnaround when we actually have that product we can sell. It's already going to the same place. So you're leveraging the supply chain that's already in place that we're using. Like all of our shit goes to that facility anyways. So just kind of like getting creative and thinking about stuff that maybe, I guess low hanging fruit is maybe not the right answer for it, but it's like, what are some things that we're doing that we're having success on that we can kind of build off of?
Yeah.
And that's what I try and think about sometimes, but honestly, man, I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
There are days where stuff happens and I get an idea or something comes to me through whatever I'm reading or listening to. And there's other days where it's like, I don't know what the hell I need to be doing today. I'm going to see where I can help in the business. If there's other stuff that Nick needs help with or Brett or whatever else, like we're still a small team. There's only 8 of us. Like I'm not Mr. up in the ivory tower, just sitting back, watching all the shit happen. And it's like, let me find some work that I can do if there's not something that I can think from a strategic standpoint. And to be honest with you, strategy is one of those things that like, it seems made up almost. Like you can go to school and like listen to all these people talk about it and all this stuff. And it's like, what the fuck actually is this? Does anybody really know what it means? Mm-hmm. I'm being dead serious. At least to me, like that is my interpretation of it. People love to throw this.
The way you said buzzword
people love to throw
earlier,
this word around.
Exactly. Like the, I'm blanking on his name, James Schooler, we had on last week. He talked about it just like management speak. Where it's like you start saying these things because it sounds like the right answer, but it's like you're not actually giving any direction. Yeah. You're just saying these broad words to make it sound good.
Exactly. And so I kind of struggle with that sometimes. It's like I'm trying to figure out to the best of my ability the things I need to do to drive us forward. And what I realize more and more sometimes, particularly the last couple of weeks, is like the less that I do often is even better. Because we're kind of at a point to where I have such great people around that are really good at what they do. It's more about making sure that they are being provided for and feeling supported and everything and just letting them do their fucking job and leaving them alone. Which is like, I mean, it's awesome, but it's like we're going back to the checklist thing. I have a need to want to feel like I'm accomplishing something. And that's maybe more of an internal issue to work through versus I don't know what I'm doing with my free time type of deal. Maybe somewhere the answer is in the gray area in between the two. But that was a kind of a tangent I went off on. Cam, I'm sorry. I don't even remember what
you're good. And
your initial question was, man.
Speaking of tangents, I got a civilian question every now and then these come up, and this feels a little silly, but you're the right person to ask, Spencer. So you're talking about like the apparel and military connection, all that kind of stuff. Y'all have uniforms.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this weird thing as a civilian where I'm like, you're selling all this stuff and it's like, but you guys got uniforms all the freaking time. Does it just look cool after work? Are guys like, Dad, or guys like you're able to get the special hat because you're Green Berets? Like, talk me through a little bit of what that world looks like, because as a civilian, it feels weird.
Yeah. I will definitely let Otis speak on the GB side. A lot of times if in the company area, down in the company level, if you're not like in the aircraft, you're not wearing a top. And so 9 times out of 10, it's like, let me show off some shit when I take off my flight suit top. Everybody has to go to PT. God, I hated mandatory PT. And I won't get off on a tangent on that, but you have to wear something. So it's like people would much rather wear their unit crest and motto than Army or Air Force or whatever, thing you're issued or expected to go by at the PX. So those are opportunities on a day-to-day basis where you have stuff to wear that. And then on the weekends and stuff too. I mean, not just pilots, but like a lot of people that serve are very proud of the time that they spent or the time that they're currently spending serving. And it's a way for them to, either subtly or maybe more in your face, depending on, what kind of designs and stuff you're repping, to highlight that and say like, hey, I do this and I'm proud of it. And so if I'm, me going to the game on Saturday or to the watering hole or to the gym or whatever it might be, it's a form of self-expression. And so whether you're in the uniform or not, I think that's why it's such a thing that people like. So, I mean, look at the shit on the back of my walls, right? Like we all have all this stuff. It's stuff that we're proud of, right? It doesn't matter if you did a couple years or 20. Most people, I'm generalizing here, but like most people are proud of at least some aspect of their service. And I think apparel is such a cool and interesting way to tap into that because it's something that they can visually take with them wherever they go, and express that pride, for lack of better words.
Yeah. Esprit de corps. There's a lot of that drives you to wear that T-shirt or whatever, and just shows, yeah, this is what I do, or this is the organization I'm part of. And I think there's a lot of that. And yeah, we had those similar opportunities depending on what we were doing, wearing something different, sometimes much different. But it was, as long as Sergeant Major's not listening, I'm not going to get in trouble, for that hat I wore or the T-shirt or maybe a patch. Like my brothers in third group just got in trouble for wearing a patch that apparently a unit in the Nazi military, the Nazi army wore.
Oh shit!
Yeah, and truthfully, the inside story was it wasn't a mistake. They've been schooled on it before, dumbasses. But we all know if there's going to be cameras around, you better watch what you have on. If you haven't learned that, there's your lesson for the day, folks. There's cameras around. Better watch what you're doing, wearing, and saying. I want to jump back to something I think is really interesting. I think it'd be a great something to share with our listeners is the supply chain. You mentioned your vendor right now. It sounds like you got a great relationship.
Yes.
Was that awesome. Luck, or was that the third one or the 10th one or whatever? How did you kind of go through that process?
I am happy to talk on that. When we first got started, it was when we first got started, we go to a local screen printing shop, right? But you have to buy a bunch of stuff in bulk and yada, yada, yada. And that's all those issues that we've tried to simplify and streamline with the custom apparel process is what we struggle with, in bringing in our own inventory and then warehousing it in somebody's garage or whatever else. And I took some class that my buddy sent me. I can't remember the guy's was it Tap Out back in the day? You guys remember the Tap Out t-shirts and stuff? It was big in the UFC realm, mid to late 2000s. That dude put this class together with some other gal that had a yoga inspired brand. And I learned about print on demand in that class. And I was like, okay, this is a really cool concept. There's no overhead. So these people are already holding all of the inventory for the blanks, which is what we call a t-shirt or hoodie or whatever blank garment that's going to be printed on with your stuff. And so we experimented with a few of those different companies. And as we started to grow with the custom apparel stuff and then eventually transition into what we're doing with the nonprofit, which I'd love to be able to talk about if we still have time at some point, is there was no control over that. So if a product went out the door that was messed up and somebody got it, there was no way for me to rectify that. It was oh, we're sorry, we'll refund them and send them a new one. And these organizations, they've got all sorts of different companies that are working with them. So I'm not even talking about hey, you got the half shirt instead of the MILF's shirt. It's you got something from a completely different organization. And that if you're a first time customer and that's your first touch point with Brotallion, you are not coming back and shopping with us. And so it's we've got to find something else. We don't have the capital to open up our own warehouse or do any of that kind of stuff. And as we were working through this, this was kind of pre me making the decision to go in on all this anyways. Brett's good friend, father-in-law has been an entrepreneur for a very long time and has a lot of great connections. And he was able to introduce us to our strategic partner who we use today. And so that has been a really incredible relationship. We've both grown collectively together. What she does for us is not something that she does for her other clients. We're a unique client and we've helped her scale that component of her business, which has been really cool. And then consequentially, she's helped us grow immensely. And so it's, even knowing it's a separate organization, it's really she's a part of the team. In a way, we're kind of a part of her team as well, which has been a lot of fun. So yes, we have, to answer your question, a really great relationship there. We did blow through a bunch of the traditional POD or print on demand companies that you see. I mean, that industry as a whole, I feel over the past 7 years has blown. I mean, those places are all over the place. And there's the military t-shirt company is a dime a dozen. I always laugh and it's oh yeah, I run a t-shirt company. It's I'm sure you're going to, laugh in my face or whatever else. But that that POD type of system is so prominent now. And so for us, it's been a huge blessing to move away from one of those cookie cutter types of scenarios and actually have a legitimate business relationship with another individual who is invested in the quality of our products and what our users get, versus just some corporate entity that's just churning and burning. And they don't really have a care what goes out the door, or fixing a system to prevent, mishaps and other stuff going on as well.
Awesome. Yeah, there's, I think the thread that I picked up it boils down to the relationship. Found the right one and built the relationship, and that's what's made it successful.
And to answer your question, finding her was probably a bit of luck, to be honest. I mean, there's luck involved in everything. I won't tell you that we got lucky all the time. Obviously you have to show up and work hard. But if you look at any team that's won a national title or anything, there's always a game or a play during that season where the ball bounced the right way and you can't explain it. And there's a little bit of luck involved. Obviously there's all the preparation and the hard work and shit that goes into that. But you'd be silly if you said that luck doesn't play a role. And so I think that in that particular situation, we were lucky that we got introduced to her. I mean, had Brett not gone to West Point with this dude who happened to marry into this family with this guy that was connected, what the hell, man? That wasn't planned, we got lucky. So yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Oh man, you could really trace some roots back to hadn't decided to go to West Point and met somebody that
yeah, exactly.
I gotta say though, that is an important thing. We talked about how hard is an entrepreneur to be resilient, keep pushing through all those roadblocks. That is the kind of funny thing. It's really hard to tell that story of the perfect luck facing forward. But as soon as you turn around, it's if I hadn't, gone to West Point and done this, and if I just hadn't filled my water bottle up that day, you could paint the perfect story if you want to.
That's fair. That's fair.
Tell us about Blue Skies. Did I get the name right?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. This has really become, over the past year and particularly the past few months, my true passion and I believe purpose for why I was put on this earth. So I mentioned before that I finished up at 7th Group on active duty as a liaison guy. Basically, all I did was help them get aircraft, and it was a lot of fun working with them. But we were still involved in combat operations in Afghanistan at that time, and we unfortunately lost a couple of people while I was with that unit and working in the operations. So I got to witness firsthand what that casualty situation looked like. I'd never been exposed to that. We didn't lose anybody on deployment. Never had an aircraft go down in any unit that I was a part of. And so that was an eye-opening experience. And one of the things that happened was the OPSO telling, one of the captains to get the Green Beret Foundation on the phone so that we can make sure that these guys are able to have all the family members that they want go to the dignified transfer of the remains, because the Army only pays for so much stuff. And as you guys know, not everybody has the perfect family situation where it's all set up perfectly. There's divorces and extended family and things that happen. And, that was the first I had heard of the Green Beret Foundation. And so I did some own self-research on that organization. I was looking through their website and I was wow, this is fucking awesome. This is really incredible. At the same time, there was a guy in 1-7 who had a t-shirt shop, and he did basically what we do for Brotallion, but kind of for the SF community. They did some custom swag for SF units and some, SF inspired logos and everything. And he put out a memorial t-shirt honoring Lou. And I forget the other individual's name who made that sacrifice. And he had it basically for a few weeks or whatever available, and then donated all the profits of that to the spouses. And that stuff, it helps. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. Number one, that SGLI is not kicking in for a significant period of time. There's travel, there's lodging, there's childcare fees, there's pets, there's food. I mean, you name it. During that first 48 hours to 6 months of expenses that pile up with these types of situations. And so I thought that was really cool that he was leveraging his business to, make a difference. So that was in August of 2019. And about a month later, a UH-60 went down in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and Major Trevor Joseph was one of the pilots on board, and he did not survive that mishap. And so I talked to Brett and was like, hey, I'd like to do a memorial t-shirt for him and basically just do exactly what this guy did. Let's make a t-shirt that honors the sacrifice that he made, and then we can donate all the profits to his spouse, and let's try it. And maybe we can get her, a couple $1,000s or whatever. And we did that, and we raised over $13,000. And it was like eye-opening situation that we were able to pull together that much support. And as we did more research, there was no nonprofit organization that provided any sort of post-mishap support to Army Aviation Gold Star families. And so that was like, it should be us. Nobody else is fucking doing it. Why not us? We already have kind of this community built with Brotallion. It's very clear that we can leverage that for good. And that's how it started. So we supported a few mishaps prior to the official incorporation of the foundation and everything. But eventually we're able to get all the paperwork taken care of and leverage the family attorney to get all that stuff legalized. And the 501c3 was officially set up in June of 2020. And for a long time, Brotallion would basically fund the nonprofit and enable us to support these families. So we would do memorial t-shirts and apparel for each mishap, and then we would donate all of those profits to the foundation to then be granted to the families. And it honestly, it was great. The two big problems with it was, number one, it took a real financial toll on Brotallion. And I'm happy to have been able to do that because of the mission set. But like at the same time, I do have a business to run and, bills to pay and that kind of stuff. And so that was not sustainable. And then number two, like it looks weird, right? Like this company is making these t-shirts. It's like, are they skimming off the top? Like what's going on with this? It's like, we have to get the foundation to a healthy point to where it can operate by itself. And so fortunately, January of this year, like that stuff is all standing by itself. And obviously we still promote everything with Brotallion. It's a lot of the same people behind both organizations. But that was kind of the origin story of standing up Blue Skies. And I was fortunate enough, here's another luck circumstance. When I was down in Destin, my next door neighbor, Eric, was a Marine Corps Cobra pilot, and he was stationed out in San Diego a few years prior with a guy named Jack Guevara, who started the Wingman Foundation. And they do the same thing for naval aviation. So Navy, Coast Guard, and Marine Corps. And so he connected us. I talked to Jack for like 2.5 hours. Jack is an absolute stud. I mean, Marine Corps pilot, Columbia MBA guy, worked at McKinsey. Now he's in energy and all this other crazy shit. And it's just like, Jesus, man, this guy's awesome. And he was like, you guys need to do it. He was like, nobody did it for us. We made a decision to figure it out and make it happen. You guys are in the same exact shoes we were 5 years ago or whatever the situation was. He's like, I'll help answer any questions you might have. You guys will be able to figure it out. And basically it gave us the push because most people said, don't do it. Most people were like, the military nonprofit it's just like the t-shirt company, right? It's a dime a dozen. It's a saturated space. And we're like, yeah, but nobody does this for Army pilots and crew chiefs. Like they are not being served. Their Gold Star families are not being taken care of. Like, why should we try and punt this to some other organization and that doesn't give a shit or have the understanding of what these families go through or whatever? And so Jack was a real catalyst in helping push us towards taking that step and going through the process of getting all that paperwork and all that stuff taken care of. And so I really am appreciative of that connection that Eric made for us. And I still chat with him every once in a while too. And, the Wingman Foundation is a really incredible organization too. So that is kind of the origin story of Blue Skies. And as I've started to realize more and more is the Gold Star support is really important. And it's at the foundation of what we do, but there's so much more that we can do with that organization for the Army aviation community as a whole and those aircrew members and their families. And so I'm in the process it's already done, rewriting our bylaws to kind of amend that and open our aperture with how we can provide support. And then we'll have the board vote on that here next week when we meet for Q2 and sign off on that. But the two programs in place are casualty assistance / financial support. And so basically what that looks like is an Army aircraft goes down. one or more crew members have taken their final flight, they don't come home. We work through an approval process, and that's mainly just to make sure that we're maintaining a good relationship with the community and the family members. We don't just launch a fundraiser on behalf of these families. We get approval from the chain of command, and then we typically work through a CAO, or sometimes we'll have family members just straight up reach out to us. Each situation is a little bit different. We get the family member approval, and then we start a fundraising process. We give them an immediate casualty assistance of $2,500, and that's to help alleviate some of those expenses that we talked on earlier. And then the fundraising process goes on for about 30 days, about a month. And so we do online fundraising, and then we also still do, the foundation now does all the apparel and everything. And the same thing, all those profits are granted specifically to those families for that cause. And that's program number one. Program number two is something that we've been wanting to do for a long time, but it's just always been, the funds always end up going towards these mishaps because the past few years have just been kind of brutal for our community. But that is looking forward into the immediate financial assistance is great, but how do we provide some more long-term support to these families? And it's looking at education, because 9 times out of 10, there's children that are involved in these situations, and college is fucking expensive. And if you don't want to go to college, trade school's not cheap either. And so we've got an endowment fund set up earlier in March. And now the plan now is to be able to build the principal to a high enough level of that to where we can take a chunk out of that whenever we need to, prioritizing Gold Star children by age, to be like, hey, you want to go to state school for 4 years? Here's $100K. You want to go learn how to be a welder or an electrician? Sweet. Here's $25K, or whatever that looks like. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. But that program is now set up. We're working on funding it. And then, as I mentioned, amending the bylaws to be able to provide other mechanisms of support outside of just the Gold Star families. Maybe that's mental health stuff down the road, or whatever that might be. If there's a problem that comes up that, we find air crew members or their families are struggling with, we want to be the organization that's able to provide that support, or have a strategic relationship that we can refer them to and be like, hey, we don't do this, but these guys and girls over here do, and they'll get you squared away and taken care of. And so I am becoming more and more obsessed with the vision and building out that organization to be on the level of a Green Beret Foundation or a Navy SEAL Foundation, or any of those like flagship nonprofits that like fucking get after it and do all sorts of stuff for their communities. Like, that's where I want Blue Skies to be in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad you saw that gap and decided to be the one to fill it. That is really a great thing to do. And,
thank you.
Speaks to taking care of your tribe, right?
Absolutely.
I love it. And, shifting gears and thinking about what I learned, I like the idea of just taking the plunge. Because I'm an action guy myself, biased to action. I think somebody accused me of one time. But there's so much truth to that too. The waiting and trying to figure out what perfect looks like never works. So sometimes, like you learned in the book Shoe Dog, sometimes if you start moving, you're going to find the right answer. So, Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, for me, and actually I guess it's in a kind of similar vein, talking about like the scripting of the chaos and the, like the pattern recognition and all those kind of things. Thinking that through a little bit more in my rugby example of it is the game slowing down, and how that's something like we talk about understanding these like decisions and these individual systems and processes that go into business or rugby or, flying a plane, whatever it is. Like, you can script all of those little things. And then in real time, you have to be able to analyze and see what's happening so you can make that right decision. That's where the time comes in. You can never learn that. The game has to literally slow down for you. Whether you're coach, player, whatever it is, like, those decisions come so fast. Once it starts to slow down, you can see those things moving. You can start to recognize those patterns. That's how you reach that level of performance in your business or whatever it is. And so I think that's a really interesting thing of looking at the business that way, something I never really thought about. When you're struggling in the business, you're at that next level. You jumped up another league, and now it's like, okay, the game is way too freaking fast. when you've got to go through, understand those patterns, and then eventually the game starts to slow down and you can feel that performance reach that flow state again. So for me, that was a really interesting thing, talking about the recognizing patterns and the game slowing down like that.
Spencer, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
For me, it was interesting to actually think about applicability of stuff that I did in the Army into the real world. Because a lot of times I'm so far removed from it now. Like I get together with some of my friends and they're still in and they're talking about all this stuff. And I'm like, God damn, I don't even know what you guys are talking about anymore. And so it's interesting to look back on that and not just see it for like, hey, this was one chapter, it's closed, I'm doing something else now. But the fact that I'm still leaning on experiences throughout that, 10-ish years of a career that I did, that's still helping me, move forward and succeed in different elements today, which is kind of cool. I'm often just kind of like focused on whatever it is I need to do now and don't really have the maybe the patience, if that's the right word, to sit back and think about some of the stuff that I've learned and things that have happened or whatever. So it was kind of nice to be forced into a position to think about. I think it was Cam, you that asked that question, like, hey, what's some stuff that you did as a pilot that, kind of ties into what you do today? So that was cool to reflect on that.
Awesome. Spencer, man, how do folks find you, get in touch with you, and learn more about how they can support Blue Skies Foundation?
Yep. I apologize for the length of this domain, but I'm not changing it anytime soon. So you can go to our website at thebrotalionblueskiesfoundation.org. We're also on social media at blue_skies_foundation. And then you can also go to Brotallion and you'll be able to navigate yourself from there to Blue Skies and then, the for-profit side of things as well. I'm on LinkedIn, I guess, if people like to connect on that stuff. I do have an Instagram. I've really tried to remove myself from social media for the most part, just because it unfortunately can be a very toxic place. But I'm on there and I do check it, every couple of days and look at that kind of stuff. So if you want to hit me up there, it's Smokey_Payne. And I can email this stuff to you guys too. I can't remember if I did already or not, but yeah, any of that stuff, we're on all the social media platforms. And again, the website is the BrotalionBlueSkiesFoundation.org.
Awesome. Spencer, man, it's been great hanging out with you today. We really appreciate your time.
Likewise, guys. I really appreciate you reaching out, Otis, and staying on top of me. I also thank you for the grace for the few minutes of delay here, working through my computer stuff. I'm really grateful to come on here and get a couple moments to share some stuff that I've learned. Hopefully somebody learns something. We listed all that stuff out. I'm happy to talk to anybody, whether you're in the same space or if it's just a dude or girl that is transitioning out of the military and doesn't know what that looks like. I'm definitely not the expert, but I know a lot of people that are and that have great organizations that facilitate that kind of stuff. So if there's anything within that spectrum of transition or business or entrepreneurship, I'd be happy to chat with you at some point. Just hit me up. I'm a normal person. I'm not going to just ignore you or yell at you or whatever else. Like, it's a weird thing about the whole transition thing. Like, it's not talked about a lot. There are great resources out there, but it's almost like if you don't know, you don't know kind of deal. So if somebody listening happens to fall into that category, please hit me up and I'll connect you with the right people.
Awesome. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Spencer Payne, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.